Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Podcast, episode number 90. Chris Jacobson and the Viking Buck, a Minnesota monster. The Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
Hey, this is Jeremy Moore with DogboneHunter.com. Get ready for another amazing show on the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Podcast.
Hey, this is Matt Duff.
And Jeff Danker.
We're Major League Bow Hunter, and you're listening to the best podcast on the internet, the Big Buck Registry.
I'm Jim Stickles, your biologist, and you're listening to my favorite hunting podcast on the internet, Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Podcast.
Welcome to the show. This is Jay Scott, your host of the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Deer Hunting Podcast. I am also joined by my good friend, the hound dog, the Chubby Tines master, Dusty Phillips.
How is everybody? Jay, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing good. I'm doing
Man,
well. It's good or well? Well, I think it's well.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm doing well. Either way, I just feel good.
I do too. It's great to be back on the mic, and it's great to have all the listeners tune in with us to take the next adventure right here on the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast.
I love having friends along the way as we get to engage in a great deer story.
Absolutely, man. You know, there's nothing better to listen to than a great deer story. You know, you agree with that?
I love them. I've always loved them. I've loved them since I was a kid, and to this day, I still love them. It's
amazing how this gets in your blood and in your system, and you really enjoy it. You know,
it could be somebody you meet in the woods. Could be just somebody you just pull up next to, and they're at the deer station too. Whatever. I'll sit there completely engaged, listening to a good deer story.
I've been late to stuff because of a deer story.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah.
It's amazing though, you know. What's the weather doing in New Hampshire? I'm telling you, here in Ohio, it's nice out.
It's warmed up. It's not quite as nice as I think it should be, but it's doing its typical thing. It's like above freezing during the day, freezing at night, below freezing at night. So this is a good time for maple sugaring and collecting sap. It's a great New England thing to do, but it really can't happen unless these temperatures do exactly this. Mid 40s, 25 at night.
Right. We've been touching into the 50s, and we got into the 60s a little bit last week. So it's pretty amazing, really, that spring's almost here. You know, we're getting out and doing a little shed hunting. It's muddy.
I think spring is funny because spring is actually a date. It's not a season. I mean, it is a season, but there's actually a date. It doesn't start based off of temperature. It starts based off of a date on a calendar.
Right. You know, and the earth's all changing. The ground's saturated from the snow and being frozen.
Yeah.
And it's a muddy mess. But I think I can deal with that for what's to come, you know?
Yeah, when it warms up during the day, we get, especially that there's a couple days where it actually almost touched 50 and it saturated the ground. All the snow melted in certain spots. It made it really muddy, and then it just froze up at night. So it hasn't really gotten too much higher than 35 since then. But in that process, all the snow came off of my barn roof and just flooded my four-wheeler trailer. So I got to go dig some more.
You gotta love the big snow that you guys get up that way. That's some deep snow. How many inches did you have?
I think we totaled. I think total snowfall ended up being 56 inches. What stayed on the ground probably was a good 48 inches throughout the entire season until now.
It's amazing.
Now, keep in mind that I have pictures of my game camera where the ground where we had snow, it had melted down to bare ground again late December. So all this stuff happened starting in the first week of January.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, that's rough on the deer herd.
It is, but it's also not too bad because it started so late. And
Right.
They were still able to move around for pretty much all through January. It wasn't until we got to February that things got a little tough. Really cold temps, and the snow wasn't melting during the day. So they had to basically survive a month's worth of really bad weather. But now it's kind of back to normal. So the deer herd, I think, did fairly well because although it feels like a lot, it was actually a short amount of time that they couldn't move.
Right. Yeah, I understand that. Hopefully it didn't kill off too many of the herd there in New Hampshire, and this year is a great year coming.
Yeah, I think it will be. We'll have to see what the biologists say, but I'm just from my speculative observations, I'd say we're doing okay.
Right on. So let's get into a great deer story. Who we got on the show tonight, Jay?
Well, guess where we're going today? We're going to Minnesota.
Minnesota,
of all places.
Home of the Vikings.
Home of the Vikings. We don't go to Minnesota very often. We usually, we get a lot coming out of Ohio, but we're going to Minnesota tonight. And we're going to talk to Christopher Jacobson, who shot what is now known as the Viking Buck, courtesy of Mr. Dusty Phillips.
It's amazing how that, a picture and a few seconds, a deer name comes in my head.
You are like a world-class deer namer.
Yeah, it's just one of them things that I enjoy it, and I also see the name,
Yeah.
It was pretty amazing to be able to look at this deer that Chris shot and be able to pull the name as quickly as I did just by looking at it.
Now, why did you name it that? Tell me more about what you thought. I mean, we've seen the pictures.
Yeah, this deer we're getting ready to talk about tonight on the podcast is amazingly heavy mass on the main frame. The mass is carried throughout the antlers, but throughout the points, G2, 3s. But the main beam on this particular buck, it literally looks like a Viking helmet. When you look at a picture, the antlers are curved up like the Viking, the horns that were on the Viking helmet, and the mass is there. It looks just like the horns on the Viking helmet. If you literally took these antlers off, put them on a Viking helmet, it would look just like a Viking helmet walking at it.
If you cut off the short tines around it, it would be a Viking helmet with a really long horn on both sides.
It'd be cool.
Imagine if you did cut off the tines, it would be like one of those longhorn steers.
Yeah, it would.
It'd be crazy.
Yeah, big mass, carried 5 inches all the way out on average.
Yep.
From the base was 6 inches, I think Kurt said, and the mass runs clear to dang near the tip of the main beam. I mean, it's crazy mass.
And we, as I said, I think we need a new scoring system for bucks of this nature.
It's amazing.
You're not going to get a high score, but what a awesome rack.
Oh yeah, it's fabulous rack. Mass, unbelievable mass.
Yep. Well, I think we should get him going right away. But before we do, I have a favor to ask of each and every one of you listening to the show. And we could use a little help from you. We need some help gathering some funds to keep the show going. And I don't want you to send in stuff you don't have. That's not what I'm asking for. It's hard times out there for a lot of people, and I don't want anybody to send in money for this project. But if you have a couple extra bucks, even if you have an extra $2, I would gladly take it to help fund our show.
Yeah, it would be great. We're not asking that if you're running on hard times, don't contribute. But if you got an extra couple bucks laying around and you're willing to help out, that'd be awesome. Donate. How can they donate, Jay?
Well, we have set up a page specifically for donations to the show. And again, a little bit helps, more helps, obviously, but don't send it in if you can't afford it. But if you can afford it, $2, $50, $100, whatever you want to send that you can afford. The best place to go is www.bigbuckregistry.com/donate. You'll see a big button there, and it'll give you some details, and then that'll bring you to a PayPal link, and you can type in whatever you feel like donating to the cause. And what you're donating to is helping us pay our bills to keep this show going, the hosting, the monthly cost that it takes us to upload and keep this show alive and well with all of our data and all of our archive shows. It does cost money, and we could use a little help from great fans and hunters and listeners just like yourself.
Absolutely. And I'm going to give a shout out, Jay.
Who are you shouting out to, Dusty?
I'm going to shout out to James Keller.
James Keller
made a contribution to the Big Buck Registry, and we really appreciate that.
Yes. James, we can't thank you enough from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you for tuning into the show. Thank you for being a great fan and a great listener. And, man, your donation will go a very, very long way. So thanks, James. Thank you very much.
We really appreciate it.
Well, that's the donation piece, and let's get on to the meat and potatoes of the show.
Yeah, let's call Chris up and see what's going on with the Viking Buck.
Let's do it. Chris Jacobson. Welcome to the Big Buck Registries Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. Thank you for asking. There's really just a few reasons that we might ask somebody to be on the show. And, of course, our number one reason is that you shot a amazing giant buck. And we couldn't help but notice that the tine mass just blew me away.
Thank you. Yeah, this particular deer, I'd have to agree. I haven't seen any personally in all my years of hunting that quite compares to this particular buck. I was pretty blown away with the actual mass of the rack itself.
Yeah, it's stunning. It's absolutely stunning. Now, you got to set the stage for us. Where do you hang out? Where do you call home?
I live, my hometown is Fergus Falls, Minnesota. I was born and raised there, and I live currently about 9 miles northeast of Fergus. So, like I said, born and raised there. I grew up hunting. I've been hunting pretty much my whole life. I'm 31 years old right now.
Okay.
I've got a wife of almost 12 years. I've got 3 beautiful daughters. And, I get out in the woods as much as I can. My main love is bow hunting, but I do get out, and this particular deer was a rifle deer. But, as far as a day in the life of me, I own my own business. I am a commercial and residential carpet cleaning company.
Okay, very cool.
So I like having my own business because it allows me more time to do what I like to do.
I could dig that. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's kind of my part of the reason why I do it. It just affords me some free time, especially in the fall. So,
gotcha.
I can kind of schedule my hunts around my work more than work around hunt. But
what's life like in Minnesota where you're at? Is it city, rural? How would you describe life?
Fergus Falls it's somewhat of a retirement community as well as an agricultural area. So we are we are just about an hour southeast of Fargo, North Dakota. Most people have an idea where that is.
Yeah, because of the movie.
And, the movie has nothing to do with it, what Fargo is actually like. So we are kind of right on the edge of agricultural. Well, it's all around us, but kind of to the east of us is a lot of heavy, rich Red River Valley beet farms, and then to the west of us, and then to the east is a lot of corn and beans. So and a lot to the south as well. So and we're right on the edge of lake country too. So it's just a beautiful area to live and play.
Sounds like quite a paradise, actually. That's awesome.
Yeah. A lot of people have asked us, well, my wife especially, she'd like to move south or somewhere warmer. Minnesota's a little bit cool in the wintertime, but I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. And like I said, born and raised here, and I love the outdoor activities.
Gotcha. How'd you get into hunting? Were you a young child? Somebody teach you? Do you have a mentor of any sort?
I would say my dad got me into it primarily. My dad is about as addictive as I am, but he was much more of a waterfowler. Did a lot of waterfowl, upland bird hunting, and deer for him is more of a necessity. He goes out to fill the freezer, and he's definitely not obsessed with deer as much as I am or have become. So I would say, my love of hunting comes from him. I would go out with him as much as possible.
Okay.
Basically from very young age, 5, 6 years old. So I still hunt with him to this day. So.
Cool. That's always nice to hunt with your dad.
Yes.
It's a blessing. So tell us about your obsession. You mentioned your dad is not as obsessed with deer hunting as much as you are. Let's talk about your obsession here.
Sure.
Why do you call it that?
Well, I call it that just because there isn't a day that goes by that I'm not thinking about some facet of hunting, and deer hunting especially. I'm always thinking about how can I improve the property that I hunt, or what can I do differently? What new tactics can I employ to try to figure out a certain deer? I'm always trying to better myself in that way, and that's really come about over time. Like I said, growing up, my dad wasn't a big deer hunter. We went out for the annual deer opener, which at that time was you got 2 days. So the rifle hunt was a Saturday, Sunday, and that was pretty much it for the year. So we would go out and hunt and just have a good time. It was kind of a get-together with family. And I'd say through high school, early on in high school, I started bow hunting, and once I got my driver's license, it kind of took off from there. Just having freedom of time. Our bow season runs from mid-September through the end of December, so you're talking 3.5 months of time that you can spend in the woods, and it's just so much different going after a whitetail that isn't pressured, like when the Orange Army is out in full force. So
right.
I would say my obsession started there. Back in high school, a kid other than school, I didn't have any real responsibilities, so it was, at that time, it was quantity over quality. So I spent as much hours in the tree as I could, not necessarily in the right spots, just trying to figure it out.
Sure, trial and error, yeah.
Exactly. Over time, especially, I'm married now and kids, and I have a life and bills to pay and all kinds of other stuff now. So now it's kind of turned full circle for me, and it's become more quality over quantity. So I don't get out as much as I want, but I make sure that the times that I do go out are the odds are tipped in my favor, if you know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Right. You do your homework ahead of time, and you pick the right stand for the winds, and hope you play your cards right. So definitely matured that way. But I would definitely say that my obsession just keeps growing and growing, and part of the reason is you never really figure out the whitetail deer. I mean, you feel like you eventually get them figured out, but you don't. So it's a constant learning experience, and that's what I really enjoy about it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that always keeps you coming back because you never really solved the puzzle to begin with.
Exactly, yeah.
Just when you think you have it figured out, the puzzle changes.
Exactly, yeah.
So your hunting, most of your hunting is done nearby, sounds like, from where you live.
Yes. Like I said, I live fairly close to where I work, but I have probably 4 or 5 different properties that I hunt that are mostly within about 30 minutes of where I live. 40 minutes is probably about as far as I go.
Okay.
We do have a lot of public hunting opportunities as well, but like I said before, given my time constraints, I kind of stick to the private areas that I have, just because everything's kind of set up and ready to go for me. So
okay.
I focus my time on that. But yeah, I don't drive too far.
Okay. So public land is available, but you've chosen not to do it. You've got 5 different properties that you hunt that are private, that are all within 30 minutes of your house. Let's talk about the 5, the big 5 here.
Okay.
How did you decide that 5 was the right number? And then how did you go about picking these spots?
Okay. Well, as far as picking the spots, there was no real formula to that. It's more what was available to me. I haven't gone and done a whole lot of knocking on doors, just for the simple fact that everything that I currently hunt is either family owned or good friends own that. So I would go out and try to find more if I had time to devote to more.
Okay.
But I feel like I have enough right now that I wouldn't do justice to any more property. If something came available that I'd be interested in looking at, then I'd definitely look at it. But at this time, that's kind of, no real science to it. That's just what's available to me at this time.
So they kind of came to you in a sense, or there's kind of, you realize that there's an opportunity here. And these are friends and family, you said, that generally own these pieces of property?
Yes, for the most part. I'm kind of unique in that there are not very many members of my family that do any sort of archery hunting. So, there's a few that will rifle hunt here and there, so I kind of stay out of their way during the rifle season. And I have some certain friends that I go out during the rifle season with, and we kind of do an annual thing there. But as far as archery goes, I kind of have most of the spots to myself, which is really nice.
That's nice. All right, so you don't have any competition from other hunters because they're private. You don't have any other competition from family members because most of them don't hunt. Sounds like you got a nice setup there. So let's, would you agree?
Absolutely.
All right.
It has been a real blessing.
All right. That's cool.
Chris, would it be safe to say that the low pressure that the deer see gives you the advantage?
You'd like to think you have the advantage. The one thing that I have seen that I think would be an advantage would be to have larger pieces of property. Most of the properties that I hunt are quite small, so I still see pressure from neighbors, which, is what it is. But, as far as not having other people on the piece of property that I'm hunting, I would say yes, it's definitely an advantage to kind of be the only one out there.
Okay.
Right, absolutely.
Let's talk about the 5 pieces of property that you hunt, and let's start with the largest piece. How much acreage are we talking about?
Well, that's kind of a unique story. The largest piece that I used to hunt up until this last season was 200 acres. That's kind of part of the story to this particular buck, was losing that 200 acres and being forced onto the neighboring farm. So for that particular farm is the furthest from my house. It was mostly a wooded cow pasture type land, and I had gained permission to hunt that property back in 2008, and that was my first season of hunting. That was the fall of '08.
Okay.
And I've hunted it ever since. And then I did hunt it one time during the bow season back in September of 2014, prior to it being sold at auction.
Okay.
But I no longer have that piece.
Okay, so that one's out of your piece. Did this have anything to do with the story with the buck we're going to talk about?
It does.
It does.
Yes.
Okay, so we need to talk more about. Tell us about the other 4 pieces.
Sure.
Do you end up? I mean, having 5 different pieces that are all private is kind of unique, and especially talk to the people that we've talked to. How do you keep track of them? Do you end up naming them? Do you have a name for a particular tract of land?
No, not necessarily. I just name them kind of what they are. The one particular property, I name it by the last name of the owners.
Okay.
Then one particular piece that I do a lot of bow hunting on is owned by my grandma. So that's just my grandma's farm.
Grandma's
Yep.
property. Got it.
Yep. Another piece that I hunt, it's just a smaller piece. It's 18 acres, and that's owned by my father-in-law. So I do quite a bit of bow hunting there as well.
Okay.
And then I myself, I live on 4 acres. I don't hunt it very much. I do have a stand in my backyard, but when I have all these other pieces to go to, this one kind of gets put by the wayside. So.
Okay, so you got a big range, anywhere from 4 acres to 18 to the big one that is related to the deer story.
Yes. Yep. My grandma's property is 90 acres.
90. Okay.
So I have 4, 18. There's another 80 that I can hunt, and then a 90. And then I've got a couple other farms that I'm just looking at that my father-in-law acquired last summer. I did not hunt them last fall at all, but those are both smaller farmsteads. One is 7 acres, one is 10. So,
okay.
But definitely have some potential of holding some decent deer.
Okay. Now, when you say potential, what do you look at when you're trying to decide whether it's a good piece of property to hunt or not?
I look at, especially when it's a smaller piece like that, I look at the neighboring, the surrounding property. This one that I'm talking about that's 10 acres is surrounded by, that particular 10 acres is kind of oak pasture. So, it's really a great setup for intercepting deer. But the area around it is slough land and, lowland with CRP grasses and then some crop field as well. So I look for certain, you want to talk about like funnels and things like that. But when you're talking smaller pieces like that, you need to look at what's going to draw a deer to that area. Being you can't, if you see a deer 200 yards away and you're only on 6 or 7 acres, you can't really chase after it. So, those deer have to come to you somehow. So, I look for the surrounding area and, whether the surrounding area is going to hold deer, and then what you can do to improve that particular piece that you can hunt that would draw the deer to you.
Gotcha. Okay. And which of your 5 that you're hunting is your favorite?
Well, my absolute favorite was the one that I lost.
Okay. All right. So let's talk more about that plot.
Sure.
Then. Tell us, how did you first acquire this piece of property and when?
Like I said, back in 2008, this is a family friend of my father-in-law.
Okay.
It's owned by an elderly gentleman and his wife, and they both hunt. They're an amazing couple. And basically, my father-in-law is not a big deer hunter. He's kind of like my dad. He goes out for the camaraderie and just has a good time.
Sure.
And he got invited along one year, and it just so happened at the same time I was looking for a place to go. I used to hunt a family farm that was 80 acres prior to that was sold in 2006. So in 2007, I kind of struggled through the year with not a whole lot of places to go, these smaller properties. So then in 2008, I was invited to hunt on this property and kind of have hunted it ever since. So that was kind of how that was brought about.
Okay. And tell us about the whole layout of this plot. How many acres are we talking about? What's the landscape? If you had to describe it, what would you say it was like?
This one was there was 4 40s that were in a block, so it was a square, 160 acre square, and then there was a 40 acre L off of that, so it was 200 acres total, and then it was kind of a mix of, I would say, probably 45 to 50% of hardwoods, and then the rest was rolling hills, pasture land, and it had a couple of nice sloughs in it. So, it was a really good, the landowner rented it out as pasture land during the summer, which kept the brush down really nicely. So it was a really nice property for, being able to do some still hunting, walking around in. You could see really well. But the deer felt very comfortable there. They were there around with the cattle. There was a lot of, there wasn't a lot of food on the property to keep the deer there, but there was surrounding cropland. So it was just kind of the ideal habitat. And what made it so special is it was just set up as, the old-fashioned deer camp. We had a whole building there that was set up for with bunks in it, and we had a kitchen, and we kind of did our whole thing there. At one time, we probably had 8 or 9 guys and a couple of their wives staying there over the weekend.
Oh, wow. So it was like a deer camp.
Yeah, it was an actual deer camp. It wasn't that far away from home, but, we drove there. We spent the weekend.
Okay.
And, there was 7 or 8 different box blinds that we could go to that were elevated. And
okay.
We went out the weekend before and did put the eaters in the stands and all this. It was just kind of your quintessential deer camp, Minnesota Northwoods type thing, and that's what I really enjoyed about it.
Gotcha. Now, where are you located? Where's your town located relative to the state, like north, south, east, west? Whereabouts are you?
We are in Midwestern Minnesota, so we are about 25 miles from the border of North Dakota if you went straight west.
Okay, got it. All right.
Then about halfway north and south in the state. All
right, so you have a deer camp, and the quintessential Minnesota deer camp, and so you have a variety of people staying there. Does everybody contribute to the land at that point, or is this with the permission of the landowner? How does the land get maintained?
The land was pretty much maintained by the landowner. The people that hunted there were friends of his for the most part, and then of course I was invited along through my father-in-law, and then became friends. But the landowner and his wife were real stewards of the property, and I shouldn't say were, other than that they don't have it anymore, but
right.
They're still alive.
Right.
But they just loved the land, and they had the property for I want to say about 20 years, and it was kind of just his passion and hers as well. They go out and cut wood and clear trails and just keep it looking nice. It was their thing, and they like to share it with us. So
okay.
it was just a real blessing.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's just real giving people, taking a nice piece of property and making it available to the friends of theirs. Man. Absolutely. Doesn't get any better than that, does it?
No, not at all.
So yeah, go ahead, Dusty.
How many guys hunted on this?
On the 200 acres at the height of it, in 08, 09, and 2010, we would have, there was me and my father-in-law, and then he brought his 2 sons at that time. They weren't hunting, but they came with for fun. And then the landowner and his wife, and then there was a friend of his and his wife that would hunt as well. And then, certain years there was more than others, in that this other friend and his wife, he had a couple brothers that came from out of state. I believe one came from Colorado, and then one came actually from northern Minnesota and came down and hunted with us a couple times. So, there could be 7 or 8 of us at a time once in a while.
Right, and go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, for the most part, the ones that hunted it the most were myself and the landowner and his wife. So the 3 of us were kind of the mainstays.
Right, gotcha. What was 8 to 10 hunters comfortable on 200 acres?
That was interesting. It was very comfortable on that property. The landowner, like I said, he takes great pride in what he does, and he took painstaking measures, more so than I would have even thought, to his stand placement. There weren't any stands that could see any other stands, and there weren't any So there was no worry of being shot at. There was landmarks, hills or heavily wooded areas between us that no bullet could pass through. So I found that very interesting when I started hunting with him, that all the stands were placed strategically, that as long as people weren't out walking around, and that was one of his rules for hunting there, that if you're in your stand, you're in your stand. Just so he knew he was the only one that was really allowed to walk around and do any pushes, and just so we were safe and we knew what was going on. So I felt completely comfortable with that many people there, yes.
Great, that's awesome. That's quite a few hunters on a 200-acre parcel, but if it's laid out right, it sounds like it's pretty comfortable.
It was, yes. And at the same time, we did have the neighboring 80 to the west. So if we had to, we could put people on that as well. And that was owned by actually the people that rented his farm to put the cattle on owned the 80 to the west, and they gave us permission to hunt that as well.
Very nice.
Very nice.
So essentially, we kind of had 280 acres to hunt, and that was kind of separated just by a gravel road.
Got it. That's neat. So you've got a managed piece of property then, and it's a concerted effort amongst several different people, including the landowners, that let you hunt there. That's nice.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Now, talk to us about the deer management aspects of this land. What kind of efforts were you making to make this into a decent huntable piece of property so that you leave the big bucks and what turned out to be a giant deer that you took? And how did you go about making sure everybody was on board, and about basically how were the deer herd itself, how were they maintaining and staying healthy throughout the year, and have other bucks been harvested along the years?
Sure. I'd like to tell you that it was a big management effort, but this particular property was not. This one was kind of, I don't want to say a free-for-all, but we didn't have any, self-imposed regulation on antler size or, don't shoot does or, leave the button bucks or anything like that. The landowner is very gracious in that respect. He kind of just gave those decisions to us. So personally, I typically would wait for a larger deer, except back when I first started hunting there, our tags were much more liberal. We were allowed more deer. Right now we can shoot basically one. Back then, it was kind of the first day, shoot whatever you see, let's fill the freezers, and then we can look for horns later. And that was kind of the plan. But, personally, I would shoot and fill tags, as the deer came. And that's kind of what everybody did. But I'm always looking for a mature buck. But as far as, the management aspect of that particular piece, there wasn't a whole lot there. We didn't do any food plots, simply because of the cattle. It wouldn't have worked. The management aspect of it is pretty boring, I'm sorry to say, but there just wasn't a whole lot going on there. And I never took it upon myself to do a whole lot with that, just because it wasn't something that I owned, and it was about 40 minutes from my house. So time-wise, in the summertime, I'm very busy with work. So I never did anything as far as deer herd improvement on that property.
Yeah. Well, you say that that's not interesting, but I think that's very interesting. Dusty, would you agree that, there wasn't a major management effort on this? We always hear that, there's always a management effort. But in this case, there wasn't. I think that's fascinating.
Right. Different hunters have different ways of going about a piece of property,
The vast majority of those that I hunt with are not trophy hunters, by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, they're meat hunters, and and I would say a lot of Minnesota is that way. The deer camp of the bygone years is kind of just filled a meat bowl, and that's kind of exactly what this was. If you were lucky enough to see a big buck, you take it. I've taken 3 really what I would consider beautiful bucks in that area in the last, since 2009, and several other deer were taken in the history of that farm as well that I would consider to be just beautiful animals. So I think the genetics are there, and as far as I do think there could have been stuff done to promote that. It's just nothing that we ended up doing.
Right, I understand that. Let me ask you this. Do you think that the herds are healthier when you go in meat hunting versus trophy hunting?
That's a good question. I think in some areas that may be true. Here it's very difficult just because of the regulations. I think in Minnesota it's difficult to manage a herd on a piece of property just because you're only allowed to shoot one deer per year. So it's very difficult for someone who is trophy hunting to, they'll have to forego their entire season to take out a management buck, or again, if they want to just decrease their doe numbers, they would have to forego their buck season or their chance of shooting a big buck just to take out a doe, unless they invite other people on their property to do so for them. So here it's kind of difficult to say whether the herd is healthier, just because it's difficult to manage them by hunting.
Right,
just
I understand
due to regulation.
that. Right, that makes sense. And tell us a little bit about the regulations there in your state.
Sure. Back when I was younger, and this wasn't too many years ago, we had, let me back way up. When I first started hunting, the state is kind of broken up into a bunch of different zones or areas, and, based on deer density numbers and whatnot, the DNR decides whether they're going to have a lottery for a doe permit, or a lottery or no does at all, or just a bucks only area. So back when I was younger, the particular areas that we hunted around Fergus Falls were typically a lottery for a doe permit, and most people would put in for a lottery, and you'd probably get one every other year. So they were trying to manage things that way. Then it got to the point back when I was in high school, this was about 15 years ago, and this lasted 5 or 6 seasons, where they went to an intensive harvest, which was kind of the entire opposite end of the spectrum, and they went to 5 deer per year, only 1 antlered buck. So you could shoot up to 5 antlerless or 4 antlerless in a buck. So, those were kind of the free-for-all years, and which was really nice for someone like me who likes to bow hunt and rifle hunt and muzzleload. Now, when I say, like now, you can only shoot 1 deer per year, that's 1 deer no matter which season you're hunting. So if I shot one opening day of bow, I'm done for the year. I can't pick up a rifle unless I'm party hunting and use somebody else's tag.
I'm going to stop you right there for a quick second.
Sure.
Do you think that's the results of the 5 deer limit now that they're down to 1 deer, that maybe they over harvested them a few years?
Personally, yes. I think that 5 deer free for all, so to speak, kind of went on too long. And I think there's a lot of people in this state that would agree with me on that. And there's a lot of discussion going on about the deer population numbers and the way things are going, simply because 95% of our state last season was a 1 deer limit, and I think it angered a lot of hunters because prior to that, at least half the state, or right around there, you could at least take 2, one being a bonus or a management deer, where you could take an extra antlerless, which was really nice for a lot of people. So that is really in heavy discussion right now. I'm not quite sure what this coming season will bring as far as limits. I'm guessing they'll probably keep it the same again. I think they're really trying to figure out what is a healthy herd number for this state, and then and what the hunting efforts are going to be to try to maintain that number.
Right, exactly. What stopped the 5 deer season? Do you have any details on what the state, as far as the Hunters United, did to end the 5 deer seasons?
I'm not really sure what actually brought it to an end. I guess I'm not sure. I don't have any real insight to that.
I'd just like to ask, it's one of the things that somewhat a similar situation here in Ohio, where the deer population is supposedly real high, and hunters' eyes have witnessed that the deers they're not there in the areas where they normally would be, and they're speaking up, and I'm just wondering how you guys went about getting that number brought down to a justification as far as the herd size versus the tags that are issued. That's the reason why I want to touch base on that. There's some different states out there now that's actually in the same scenario, where maybe that they've allowed too much deer harvest, and now they're seeing the effects of it. And if you had information, I'd like to pass it along, but it's no worry that you don't. It's just something that I wanted to ask.
Other than, I know, well, no matter what you do, there's people that are against it. So I do know there were people that were against the 5 deer limit as well as there's people against the 1. So, I know they did receive feedback that way too. But
I'm sure, yeah.
I guess I don't have much insight. I do know there weren't, in my opinion, there weren't a lot of people that actually took advantage of the 5 deer limit.
Right, yeah, that's a great point there. Just because they can issue you 5 tags doesn't mean you need to use 5 tags.
Exactly. I think even myself, during those 5 or 6 seasons, I don't think I ever used more than 3 tags myself. That's
what you can manageably eat in a season,
Right.
3 deer is a lot of meat in the freezer.
It is, absolutely.
Yeah, great point. Just because they issue the tags don't mean you have to utilize them.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. That's very cool. Let's talk a little bit about your gear setup. What types of products, things do you use routinely to get ready for a deer hunt? What's in your backpack?
What's in my backpack? Well, I'm very meticulous about my scent. I do the whole scent-free shower prior to, and then all my clothes are in a scent-safe bag. I do the rubber boots, spray down when I get to my destination. I don't wear my hunting clothes to and from. I always dress while I'm there. So, I think a lot of those little things, a lot of people will say they're in your head, but to me, I think they work, so therefore they do.
Sure.
I guess that's just the way I am. I'm pretty meticulous in my scent control.
Let's get a little more detail on. Let's get a little more detail on that. As far as what kind of soap is there a brand name? The soap, the scent control soap that you use.
Personally, I use the Scentaway brand. I believe it's Hunter Specialty. I've always used that, so I use that in the soap. I use that for dryer sheet, as well as the spray. So that's kind of what I've been using. One product that I started using this year that I hadn't used prior was it's actually a Minnesota company, and that's called Nose Jammer.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of that or not, but it's a product. You can spray it on yourself. I personally don't.
I've heard of that before. Somebody was talking about that the other day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of that myself.
Yeah.
It's the first time I used it, I thought I messed up my hunt. I sprayed it on my backpack, and the thing just reeked like sweet vanilla and all kinds of what you wouldn't expect to be in the wild. I sprayed it on and I was like, oh my gosh, how is this going to go? So, but basically what I do now is I'll get in my tree. Basically anything that I touch on the climb up, or once I'm getting ready, gets a quick dose of that. And I've really seen I feel the proof is in the pudding, and I've really seen, especially this year, trying to film my own hunts. I did not get busted once this year, and I don't think I can say that in any prior season. And I had deer coming downwind, and just it was never an issue. So I'm a firm believer in the Nose Jammer products.
So Nose Jammer, you're believing that it covered you up enough that the deer were downwind and was able to pass by your winded direction.
Yes.
Interesting.
That's very interesting. We like to hear that.
Yeah.
Need to learn a little bit more about that product.
Yeah, it's a great product. I really, I've enjoyed using it. A little bit goes a long way, and it's the reason I started using that. And maybe I should back up a little bit. Back last May, I was brought on as a field staffer for a online television show based out of Northwest Arkansas, called The Hunting Grounds, and Nose Jammer is one of our sponsors. So that's one of the reasons that I've started using that, and that was also one of the reasons why I started filming my own hunts this year and really getting into the deer hunting more so than I have been. So that's what brought on the whole using the Nose Jammer.
Gotcha. Okay, very cool. What else do you keep in your backpack? What else do you do to prepare?
I always have I do bring some calls along. I always have a grunt tube. No particular one. I can't even think of what I have. I think it's an old Loman I've had for 20 years. And I do have a pack rack, a little packable rattle system, which I absolutely love. It's quiet when you want it to be. And I did rattle in a buck this year and shot that with my bow, so that was fun. I always carry a can call, and my second biggest buck to date came to that. So I'm a believer in that one as well. That was 2:00 in the afternoon on an opening day rifle hunt, and I had him come right into the can call. So I think the calls definitely have their place, especially during the rut. If the deer is there to hear it, you can definitely get a favorable response from different calls.
Gotcha.
Minnesota definitely doesn't come to your mind as a real rattle type state, and where rattling is real effective. And I would have to agree with that. I've rattled off and on a lot, and personally, I've only ever had 2 bucks come to a rattle, but I still do it. Don't ask me why, but it's just something to do, and it's fun. When it does come together, it's a blast.
Gotcha. Very nice. All right, so we've got the layout of your land. We know kind of where this happens, where you hunt, how you hunt, what you got in your backpack. Let's go back in time a little bit and walk through this hunt for this big Minnesota whitetail that you shot. Tell us about the preparation the day before. Like, what's going on in your head about going hunting the next day?
Sure. This particular buck I shot on the second day of the rifle season. So I don't know if you want me to go back, prior to a couple days back when we set up stands.
Well, let's go back even further. When were you first even aware that this buck might be on the property?
Well, that's an interesting story, because I didn't know this deer was on the property. If you allow me, I'll go back to...
We'll allow you. Absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely.
So this stems back to this 200 acres that I used to hunt. I found out just early last year that the landowners were planning to sell. I should back up even a year prior. They sold part of their 200 acres the season prior. So they had sold off 80 of that. So we were hunting on just a portion of the 200 that was left the season prior. And I did shoot a nice 8-pointer that year. That was the season of 2013. But then they had made the decision to sell the rest of it. So they were selling that at auction in mid-September, about a week after our bow season had opened up here in Minnesota. And so I really did not know. Our hunting plans were up in the air, pending who was going to buy this place and when the close date for the sale was going to be, whether we were going to get another season out of this property or not. Well, I come to find out at the sale, there was a couple people that wanted it. They ended up purchasing, and the landowners agreed on immediate possession. So basically that property was done for us. So I did not know up till about 2 weeks before our November 8th rifle opener where I was going to be sitting opening morning. What finally came together is this, I mentioned before, the neighbor to the west, where we hunted this 80-acre chunk to the west. He still gave us permission to hunt. So our plan was, it was just going to be myself and the landowner, the prior landowner of this 200, and his wife. So the three of us were going to hunt this 80, which was neighboring property to where we used to hunt. So like I said, this all came together in the last 2 weeks prior to season. And so we went out, our season's open on Saturday. We went out on Thursday, so 2 weeks prior to season, and scouted it out, figured out where to put stand. I put up a ladder stand based on prior knowledge from that landowner of where to go, just because I hadn't been on the property much myself. Okay. I had walked through a little bit of it, but I went on there very blind, which was kind of odd for me. I didn't really know what to expect for this season in 2014. So I relied heavily on his past experience. One thing that really helped me, kind of alleviate the wondering what ifs. Once I got up in my stand, I noticed there was 2 other old box stands that were broken and laying down in the woods that were near where I had placed this one. So I figured I was in a decent area because, sometimes the old timers really knew what they were doing. And so I feel like, this landowner, he put me in the spot. So
yeah, I have to comment on that. When I'm out in the woods and I come across this old wooden tree stand that's been there since the 1940s, you always have to think of what's happened here before? Like, what kind of hunting occurrences went down? Am I standing in a great spot? I must be, because this stand's been here and it's got a lot of history. So I'm with you. The old timers knew just from that experience without all the technology we have today.
Exactly. Yeah. And, and once I got up in my stand and really got the lay of the land, I realized, it was a true funnel, for every sense of the word. It was just a beautiful spot. And I was really excited at that point, just to see, what was going to happen. Like I said, going into the season very blind and not knowing the property, but, I was getting excited at that point. The landowner and his wife, we set up straw bales on the ground for them. They're elderly, so they like to sit on the ground. So we set them up with straw bales on the ground. They have kind of their own little forts going on and heaters and everything, so they're very comfortable, and we've got them in good spots too. And they're both excellent marksmen. They're great people. So yeah, that was our Thursday prior to Saturday opening morning. We spent the day out there. It was, as I recall, it was just a bluebird day, beautiful, not deer hunting weather at all.
Gotcha.
And so that was the start of it. Going into opening morning.
Right. What day and season are we talking about here?
This is this past season. This would be opening morning would be Saturday, November 8th, 2014.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep. Our opening morning, I got up into my stand, and I really had my heart set on waiting for a mature buck this year. Being we only had one tag to use. I have a tag, the landowner and his wife. I'm sorry I keep referring to him as the landowner, but none of us own the property we were hunting on. But
sure.
We had 3 tags. We talked prior to going out in the woods. We decided
when you were talking, this was prior to sunup?
Yes.
All right.
Yes,
So
prior to sunup.
How'd you get to the property? Did you come from your house? Did you stay at the camp? How did that all happen? Let's back up even further.
Sure. Well, we lost the camp when everything sold. So
okay.
We actually lost the camp 2 seasons prior. So
okay.
I actually came from my house, and this couple, they live right in Fergus Falls, so they came from their house as well.
Okay. What time did you get there roughly?
I'm trying to remember what time sunup was.
But it was sunrise, before sunrise, a couple hours before
sunrise. We're there about an hour and a half before.
Okay.
Each of us, the husband of the older couple, he drives his wife to her spot. They're both in open areas and kind of cow pasture.
Okay.
So we all kind of met at the south end of the property. There's where you can drive in there, a gate that's kind of off to the side, out of the hunting area, so to speak. And we kind of get dressed there and go over the day's game plan and say when we're going to meet for lunch. And we discussed at that time, I always like to know prior, if a doe comes by, do you want me to shoot it? Party hunting type thing.
Party, okay.
And at that point, the answer was no, and I'm completely okay with that. Everybody, our plan was everybody shoots their own deer. So,
okay.
That kind of solidified in my mind, okay, it's got to be a nice buck or I'm not pulling the trigger. So,
okay. What do you have for temperatures that time of morning? What are you looking at for wind and anything happening weather-wise?
That particular morning was very windy. We had a strong north wind, which was fine because I had faced my stand to the south, so I had it to my back the whole day. That whole day was windy. It was kind of a bear, actually. But temperature-wise wasn't bad. We didn't have any snow at that time.
Okay.
I want to say our temps were, I think they were in the 40s and 50s, I think.
All right.
I'm trying to remember back.
Real comfortable, super comfortable hunting weather.
Yeah, it was
almost too warm.
Yeah. I know our first snow of the season came the day after I shot my deer, which would have been November 10th.
Okay.
So I know opening weekend we had bare ground and we had wind and fairly comfortable temperatures.
Okay.
So
what kind of vehicle are you driving?
I was driving a GMC Yukon XL.
Okay.
At that time. I don't have that anymore, but
okay.
That was kind of my hunting rig last year, and I really liked it.
Gotcha. The hunting rig. Got it.
Yeah, it worked out great. I do a lot of bird hunting, too, so it worked out great for the dog.
Got to have a hunting rig, man.
Absolutely.
It's just the way you got to roll. Again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Cool. All right. Let's take a break because I don't want to interrupt this deer hunting story, but let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll finish this epic deer tale. Sound good?
Absolutely.
Okay. You know what the beauty of a podcast is, especially about this show? There's an entire catalog of shows we've done over the years that you can still listen to today because we keep them all there for you to listen to.
With 90 plus episodes, Jay, there is a ton of informal podcasts in the archives.
There is. There's a slew of them that you wouldn't even believe. In fact, the other day when Jim Shockey posted his picture of Milo Hansen, you know what I did? I went and I found our interview we did with Milo Hansen, which happens to be episode number 40. And I listened to the whole show, and I was just absolutely blown away how entertaining Milo Hansen is.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, if you want to get in, I was just on the Outdoor Channel watching some of Heartland Bow Hunters episode, and man, what a great video quality that Heartland puts out. You know, if you want to check out their episode, you can go to number 62.
One of my favorites is how to cut up a deer. If you do your own butchering, I'd like to learn from the Deer Butcher, which is episode 28.
You know, if you want to hear about the controversial king buck, you can go back in episode number 42. That's what Jay Fish is the owner now. And then you can also listen into the story from Johnny King at episode number 53.
It's all there. It's all there for you to download right now. And it's downloadable, it's streamable, it's radio on demand. You don't have to listen to the whole thing. You can fast forward through anything you want. I sometimes listen to it at 1.5 times because I want the content, but I don't want to spend all day listening to the show or any show that I'm listening to. That's the beauty of a podcast. We want to say thank you for tuning in to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. And I say we get back to the show.
Absolutely.
So it's windy, it's dark. You guys are coming up with a plan. You drove in,
Yeah.
You're hanging out, and where do you go from there?
From there, my walk to my stand was fairly easy. I just walk up this gravel road. Like I said, there was a gravel road that went between our two properties. So I'm walking north on this gravel road for a couple hundred yards. And, when we put up our stand, there's a 3-strand barbed wire fence there. And we had tied a rope to it where I had to walk in. Otherwise, I don't know if I'd have found it. But
Okay.
So, I'm walking in with a headlamp and looking for that rope that tells me where to walk in. And, so I got in there with probably 20 minutes to spare, I suppose.
When you say 20 minutes to spare, what do you mean? Tell us about that.
Prior to our season opens a half hour before sunrise. So
Okay.
I'm in there with about 20 minutes prior to legal shooting time, I should say.
Okay.
Which gives me enough time. I did bring a camera arm and put the camera on the camera arm and get my final spray down and just kind of get settled in. So I kind of have a pre-hunt routine, just get your seat cushion out and all that kind of stuff. So
Okay.
make sure everything's good to go.
Okay.
One kind of a side note this year, I was really worried going into season. I had LASIK eye surgery at the end of November, and so I was actually hunting with glasses this year, which was my first year ever hunting with glasses. I always wore contacts.
Interesting.
So I was extremely concerned that they were going to mess up my hunt. I had duck hunted prior to it with glasses, and I just know that the rain and glasses don't mix, and I was really concerned about my glasses fogging up when I was looking through the scope, and
Right.
I had all these things running through my head, which, there was a bunch of hogwash, but it was all in my head, but we made it through.
But the concerns were there. I mean, they were real at the moment.
At the moment they were, I remember distinctly talking to my wife about changing my appointment date so I could put my contacts back in for the hunt. Because I was that concerned that they were going to screw up my deer hunting.
Let's postpone the surgery, honey, so I can go deer hunting. That's what I like to hear. Excellent.
Yeah, so I guess I am a little obsessive, but that's how I roll, I guess.
That's the way I roll too. Absolutely. I'd put off a surgery so I wouldn't miss the deer season. No question about it. Not even a thought. It's just like, yeah, of course.
Who even thinks about getting something done when deer season's going on?
Right. We'll have to schedule it around that to make sure. Right.
Absolutely.
Anytime after December 15th is fine with me. Or before September 15th. In between, off limits.
Yeah, if the clock ticks deer 30, it's over. You can forget everything else.
I get really agitated when people schedule their weddings during that time too.
I don't attend.
I'm like, not happening.
Yeah, that's a fail from the start when they pull that trigger.
From the start. All right, we're off on a tangent. Sorry, Chris. All right, keep going.
So, I'm up in my stand, like I said, about 20 minutes prior to legal shooting time. I really, like I said, going into that particular spot pretty blind. I didn't know what to expect. So, this has never happened to me before, right at shooting time, and I mean to the minute. I have a deer walk up on me, and it walks in from the south, which is actually downwind of me, and
Interesting.
it walks straight to me, and I could tell it was a buck. I could not tell what he had for antlers. I could tell he had one of the biggest bodies I've ever seen on a deer. So I knew it was a mature deer, and I wanted badly to see what he was carrying on his head.
Right.
But I just could not see. He got to within 20 yards.
Too dark?
And then what's that?
Was it too dark?
Yes, it was just too dark to see. While it was legal enough to shoot, and I could have, I just could not, even through my scope, I could see he had something on his head, but I don't know what it was. I was waiting for him to get closer. Well, that never happened, of course. So it was a very interesting 30 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
So he walks up on me, and he comes to the trail that I walked in on, and immediately his nose goes to the ground, and I could tell, my gig's up here. So, I'm looking at him and looking at him. I'm standing. I'm not silhouetted or anything, and it's like he knew I was there. He picked his head up, just a slow head up, and we locked eyes, and it was over. He turned around and ran back the way he came from.
No way.
He was gone just as quick as he showed up. So I know without a shadow of a doubt it was a mature deer. A young buck or a doe, after seeing you, they'd have done the bob and weave, the head bob, and
right.
try to figure out what you are. But
sure.
But that mature buck, he was gone.
Gone.
So, right then and there, I figured my season was done.
Right.
I figured my chance was there and gone. I wasn't 30 seconds into my hunt, but so I'm sitting there sulking
in the dark.
Yeah, at that point, you're like, should I have, just shot him and been happy with it, or but like I said, I had made that decision that I wanted a nice mature animal with nice antlers this year, and I'm at this point I'm glad I waited, but
right.
Hindsight is 20/20.
Right. Well, maybe the other one was bigger than the one you shot. You never know.
Yeah, and it could have been the same deer.
That's true too. But it's okay not to take the shot if you don't have a good clean shot. There's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I didn't have a broadside shot either. It was head on, and granted it was close enough, but it was just I wanted to see what I was shooting at. Just
right.
Plain and simple.
Yep.
So
I'm with you.
Yeah. So after that, I'm trying to think what else happened. It was a pretty slow morning. The land to the north of me and immediately to the west is all swamp. No open water really to speak of, but the water is there. It's just mostly cattails, and there is kind of almost a land bridge that's almost 100 yards long between the finger woods that I'm sitting in, and then there's one way up to the northwest. And as I'm sitting in my stand, I can kind of make out this trail that runs through there. And I realize that trail is coming straight to me. So, I'm watching that every so often. I didn't see any deer there opening day, but the next day I did have a couple come to me on that. More toward evening that day, I did see a couple does off to the west of me, actually pretty close to where I ended up shooting my buck. But no more antlers for that day. So, that was kind of it for opening day.
Gotcha. Sun goes down. You had an eventful day. You saw some deer. Had a mature buck come through early.
Yes.
Scene closes. It's dark. You head back to the truck.
Yep. Head back to the truck. Midday we did meet for lunch. So I wasn't in the stand all day.
Yeah.
We met for lunch and kind of recapped the day, and it was pretty slow all the way around. If I remember right, everybody did see deer, but there weren't any shots to be had. So, it was. We all scored a 0 for that day.
Gotcha. Okay. Deer 1, hunters 0.
Exactly.
Day 1. All right. So day 2 starts.
Actually heading home on day 1, I did see about a 150-inch bruiser standing in the highway.
That's always a good thing.
Never fails, though.
It's about where they hang out, I think, is on the way home. That's where they go.
Yeah, I was
never fails.
Never fails.
2 miles from home, and I'm coming down the road, and it's just standing there right in the middle of the road. I actually had to slow down for it, and he stepped into the ditch and let me pass by and drew a little bit, and that was it. So
always see more deer on the way home than you do in the woods. Always. Just the way it is. Nature.
You see deer where you've never seen deer before.
Yes.
And exactly. But you could definitely tell the rut was definitely in full.
It was on.
Swing this year.
Rut was on. Got it.
It was a lot of fun that way.
Okay.
So yeah, and, typical evening, you call all your buddies and see how they did. I called my dad and see how he did, and then you wait for day two. So yeah, day two, it started out pretty much the same way as the first day. As I remember, the temperatures were a little bit colder, if I remember right. It turned into a beautiful day later on. It was real sunny and just nice, bluebird day. But and I'm pretty sure we had lost that wind that we had on Saturday. But yeah, so anyway, it was basically the same thing. We have our pre-hunt chat, decide,
Yep.
we're still at.
Did you have breakfast either morning?
No, not that I remember. I typically, when I wake up that early, I don't eat.
Okay.
Gotcha. I kind of get kind of stomach cramps if I eat that early for some reason. So I pack a lunch and snacks and all kinds of stuff with me. So
coffee, juice, anything like that?
I am not a coffee drinker.
Not a coffee drinker.
Stand the stuff.
All right.
So I do bring hot chocolate or hot cider. I do that once in a while. So,
okay.
Otherwise, water and snacks.
You're get prepped and head right out.
Yeah, basically, a repeat of the day before.
Okay.
So I'm there. I know I was running late that day, so I was late getting into my stand, and I know I wasn't in my stand 5 minutes prior to shooting light, and for me that's a big deal. I like to be there and prepared. So I was there, and I would say within it was within 5 minutes of legal shooting. I had a deer walk by. This time across that land bridge I had described earlier. I'd come in from the northwest, and that was a doe. And she had walked within 20 yards of me, and I never knew I was there. So it was just a lot of fun watching her. And then I would say within 10 minutes, a buck followed her trail. So this was a smaller buck, maybe a 5-pointer. I did get some video footage of him. He came in nose to the ground following this doe. So like I said, the rut was on. He came by and he played around my stand for a while and just kept following her trail. And that was pretty much it for the morning until I shot my deer.
Okay.
So this was, like I said, this all happened within the first 20 minutes or so. And
sure.
Then what had happened is I could see that the events leading up to me shooting my buck. I could see the landowner, who wasn't the landowner, but my hunting partner. He had gotten up out of his stand and he was walking. There was kind of a large wooded area and a hill in between him and his wife. And I could see him working his way up the hill, I assumed, kind of putting on a little drive to his wife and probably going to do a little chatting. And so I had noticed this happening about 8:45 in the morning or so. And, I didn't think a whole lot of it. When I do see a little bit of movement from people, I do keep my eyes open to see if there's anything coming or if they push a deer, but that didn't happen. So
sure.
Then I did notice, probably around 9:30, he was walking back down, and he was walking a little bit different path down the hill. This is 300 yards away from me. You basically just see an orange blob going through the trees. But so he was skirting the edge of all of these cattails that I was telling you about. And again, didn't pay a whole lot of attention, but so he kind of goes out of sight, and I catch some movement coming from that direction, and I look, and here comes a doe. So she comes bounding through, and I can see glimpses of her through the cattails, and she stops a couple times, and so I'm watching, and here comes this buck behind her, and I wish there was a better story, but it was one of those split-second decisions. I didn't have a lot of time to think about it, but the buck was going basically north to south. I could see his entire left side, and I could see pretty much from legs up, and the left side of the rack, to me, I didn't have a lot of time to judge it, but it looked, I tell everybody, it looked good enough.
Good enough.
So
got it. How far out were you eyeing this deer at this point?
He was about, I ranged it after the fact, and I believe it was about 120 yards.
Okay.
So it wasn't close, it wasn't far.
Right.
I shoot a Remington 270 with a 4-power scope, a straight 4-power. I don't have any other variable power, but I wasn't looking at him through the scope, but with the naked eye, he looked good enough. So like I said, I could only see that one side, and I distinctly remember seeing 3 tines. So I'm like, well, it's a decent buck. So I was ready to pull the trigger. So, he was standing there. The doe had gone into some red willows, some real tall, thick stuff. And I knew he was quick to follow, so I had, split second to make a decision, and I did not have a rest. I also didn't have time to put my camera on, so I did not get this one on film. But, hindsight, I don't really care. But, so yeah, I got on the deer and I pulled the trigger and he disappeared. It was as simple as that and as quick as that.
You went down or ran off?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
At that time, I didn't know. He completely disappeared. I mean, within 2 bounds, he would have been out of my sight. So I assumed he fell right where he stood because the grass was so tall I wouldn't be able to see it if he did. So I just kept my rifle ready and I watched that spot like a hawk for 10 minutes, and I never saw anything else. So I gave him a little more time. It was probably 20 minutes to a half hour before I got down. Then I had the task of trying to figure out how I was going to get to him. He was out in the middle of this slough grass, which from my stand looked about knee high. Once I got to the edge of it, I realized it's head high and there's knee deep water in spots. And, so it took me quite a while to pick my way through it, jumping clump to clump and to get over that direction. When you finally get over to where you think he is, of course, you're not quite, everything looks different from the ground. So,
oh yeah. Isn't that amazing? That's a good point. Like, everything you see from the tree stand looks completely different when you get down there.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So, the spot that I thought he fell, I was off by probably 50 yards. I was too far north, but, so I thought I completely missed. I couldn't find anything, so I'm starting to doubt myself, and I start doing some, just searching around, and eventually there he lays. From my stand, I couldn't see it, but they were actually walking on dry ground. Again, another land bridge from one little section of woods to another. There's these islands of trees out there, and he had walked this land bridge and following this doe, and there he laid, right where I shot him. So,
gotcha.
When I walked up on him, I'll be the first to admit I was actually a little disappointed. His entire left side was buried in mud, and I'm sorry, was down in the slough grass, so I could not see any of that. And then his right side, he was kind of twisted in a way that the tip of his main beam was stuck in the mud, so I thought it was actually broken. So I didn't know what I had yet. I should back up a little bit. As soon as I walked up on him, that doe he was chasing had actually bedded next to him.
No way.
So she was bedded down within 10 yards of him. She stood up and took off.
That's interesting. Now, you hear about the bucks bedding down by the doe, but that's interesting. You said that. I haven't heard that before.
Yeah, she kind of took me off my feet almost. I was looking at my buck, and all of a sudden she takes off out of the red willows next to me there. And so yeah, she had actually bedded down in that time that he was laying there.
Fascinating. Okay.
Yeah.
She must have thought it was time to take a nap like he did.
Right.
Yeah. So, that at this point, I thought I had a busted up buck, which was, my previous largest deer, was a 9-pointer taken on that other piece of property next door. Beautiful deer, my biggest bodied deer, that I've ever shot. He was just a cow. But he was all busted up too. So, I was no stranger to that. And, to me, it's a trophy either way. These old battle scarred deer, I think are just cool.
Oh yeah.
I actually, that particular buck I shot in 2009, he just has a goofy rack. He has a extreme, inside curve on one main beam, and the other one just kind of swoops out and doesn't match at all. And, he's got 2 busted tines, and, he went 258 field dressed, and just,
nice.
He just looked like a bruiser and just an old deer. And, I actually got him, I originally put his rack on the wall just as a plaque, and I regretted it. Every day I looked at that, I regretted it. And, finally decided to get him mounted. I actually got him back from the taxidermist just a week ago, so I've been looking at him every day here. But and that was my deer from 5 seasons ago. So, but anyway, back to this buck. So yeah, I finally grabbed hold of him and cleared everything off and realized what I had. And I am not an emotional person, but I did cry.
No way.
My wife would be the first to tell you, I'm not an emotional person. I don't get worked up about hardly anything. And this deer brought tears to my eyes. I was that excited. Just to see the mass on the deer and, clean everything off and, very, very symmetrical. And to have the split G3s the way they are. It makes him a non-typical, but he's a very typical non-typical. He's just a neat deer, and a very heavy deer, and just I couldn't be happier with him.
Yeah.
Did by chance you name that buck?
Did I name him?
Yeah.
I did not personally name him. I've got a friend that he's got 5 deer on the wall, his biggest being a 163, I believe it is, and he called his biggest deer Tweaky Hogface. And
Tweaky Hogface.
Yeah.
Wow.
And when I sent him the picture of this one, he kind of dubbed mine the same thing. He said, "You got your own Tweaky Hogface." So I guess that's what I call him.
All right. Like, we can't have 2 Tweaky Hogfaces on the planet.
So no, I guess I haven't named him.
Dusty is a world-class buck namer, just so you know. So I think Dusty's going to give it a shot here.
Yeah, I did check the buck out. It takes me a few minutes to do the thorough examination and get it in the classification of the name that it deserves. I looked at that buck that you shot, Chris, and I come up with the Viking buck.
Oh.
If you look at that deer, it looks just like a Viking helmet.
It does.
That is a great name. Absolutely.
So that fits the state you're in.
Yes.
And it also fits the rack that's on top of the deer, because that thing, first thing that popped in my head, that's a Viking helmet. Look at that thing. Look how heavy.
It really is.
It looks like it's got the bull horns coming out of the metal helmet,
Yeah.
The big, huge mass. I'm going with the Viking buck.
I'll second that.
I like the name. I think I'll keep that.
I'm
I
with
won't
you,
take
man.
credit for it, though.
That's a great name. The Viking buck.
I love it.
Especially his brow tines. They come straight up, and they're just daggers. They're going to inflict some pain.
Yeah, so it just fits the buck.
It seems to me that there needs to be a whole other category of scoring that, all these other bucks you see, they're not super thick. I mean, they're thick, but there's this other like mega category of just these chubby tines bucks that exist out there that seems like they should just have their own brand new scoring system altogether.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that. I have a good friend of mine he's an insane whitetail hunter. He's up there with me. He's more of a bow hunter. He has shot some massive deer as well. His biggest being, I believe it's a 193 non-typical. But he's got some mass as well. And we were both chatting that the scoring system doesn't give enough credit to the mass.
It doesn't.
He brought up a good point that I thought was very interesting, that they should do like a water submersion. So you're actually getting like cubic centimeters of antler.
Right.
And it would take out all imperfections. It would just displace water. That would be kind of interesting.
That would be the pure system altogether.
It would, absolutely.
Yeah. I guess you could add in symmetry somewhere if you wanted to, but I think that would be the pure mass way to check the rack.
Exactly.
Like, just score.
It would be.
How much water did you displace? That would be it.
Yeah, I personally, I would love to see something like that implemented, but there's nothing wrong with the score or the scoring system that is in place right now. I feel like it doesn't give enough credit to the mass.
I agree. I completely agree with that. I think that there's this whole other category, like I said, that it almost deserves a whole other, you got the typical, the non-typical, then you got the Viking bucks. That's what we need. We need the Viking scoring system.
What's the biggest mass on the main beam of that buck?
Let's see. The biggest mass measurement, I got 6 inches on down at the bases. And all my measurements were, well, except right out to the ends, all my measurements were, I had 6, 5 2/8, 5 7/8, another 5 6/8. So I mean, it's thick from top to bottom. The main beams really, they just carry the mass all the way out. Even it had to be scored as an 8-pointer, so I had to take the measurement halfway between the last tine and the tip, and even that is 4.5 inches.
Wow! So this Viking buck, and I'm going to explain this for the listeners. I mean, this thing has mass from the bases clear to the tip, and you're talking out towards the tip. It was 4 inches, so it carried an average of 5 inches all the way through the main beam on both sides.
Yes, basically.
That's amazing.
The tip is twice as thick as a really quality deer that would be on the base of the main beam.
Oh, absolutely.
That's insane.
and another testament to the actual mass is like the outside spread is 20 inches. The inside spread is 16. So that tells you each antler is 2 inches wide.
Wow.
Just looking down on it.
Right.
It's really remarkable. And another thing that's interesting is both of the tips on the main beams are bladed, so they've actually flattened out, and they look like knives, kind of on the leading edge of both of them. So it's really interesting. There's a real tight curl to both the antlers. Both the main beams that are actually look very similar to the deer I shot on a neighboring property in 2009. I personally believe they're related deer. They both share the mass. That one had 5.5-inch bases as well. So, I've shot 2 deer on that basically same property that shared these mass genes. So, I think they're related deer.
I would second that. Absolutely. It's, you got a nice little gene pool of fatty tine bucks walking around out there. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's
a sweet rack.
Land of the Viking bucks. Whew. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, I'm real happy with it. I just, store aside, it's just, it's got the character, and I don't know. If you look at, all the different characteristics of a rack, you can have width, you can have height, you can have, length of tines, and you can have mass. Personally, I just love the mass. I just think it's impressive. I don't want to toot my own horn because it was a luck deer, and I'm not going to say that I'm the best hunter out there and that I grew this deer for the last 5 years. And, I'll be the first to tell you that I drew the lucky straw that day. And extremely humbled by being able to take an animal that way, and that size. But I just love the mass.
Yeah.
Oh, I can definitely see why.
I love it too. I think it's a beautiful animal, and it's just a unique deer and a unique rack. I love it. Absolutely love it. And that's what caught my eye, and that's why I've asked you to join us on the Big Buck Deer Hunting Podcast to tell that tale. And man, you told it well. So, Chris, I can't say thank you enough for telling that whole story.
No, it's my pleasure. I just, I love talking deer hunting. It's the way I am. It's what I do.
Awesome.
But yeah,
yep.
Just
give us your best deer hunting tip, Chris. You got one tip. Your best number one deer hunting tip. Let's hear it.
Of all time. What do you got?
Of all time, based on my prior experience, I would say it's just to be persistent. That's it's not really a tip. It's just figure out what you want to do, what your goal is, and set that goal, and don't let anything get in the way.
Right.
That's a great tip.
Great tip. Well, that was just fantastic, Chris. Thanks for joining us on the Big Buck Podcast, and thanks for joining us on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a lot of fun.
Another beautifully scripted, told by the hunter themselves, deer story in the books.
Man, the Viking Buck. What a great story, Jeff.
Great story.
It goes to show you that not only you can lose a farm and go next door and shoot a buck off the next door neighbor's farm. It goes to show you that, losing a farm always isn't a bad thing. Yeah, you can be down and out, and yeah, you can be depressed that you're losing this particular farm. But, there's always a neighbor that you could possibly ask. There's always somebody in the general area where there's some deer at. It doesn't hurt to ask around, and it's always a good thing when you can get on the neighboring property and capitalize on harvesting a buck.
It is a beautiful system, and the deer don't go away. They can show up on the next line over, the next plot over. It's just one of those things, and Chris was there at the right place, right time.
Yeah, amazing story, Chris. Thank you for joining us.
Just awesome. And he said he cried. I think I'd cry too. What was fascinating about that whole thing?
Tell me.
The doe that laid down.
Yeah, he got the dirt nap.
Right.
And she thought it was time to take a nap.
Right. Here you always think that the bucks follow the does, and you always see them laying down when the doe lays down. But I never thought to think that a doe would lay down because they want to hang with the buck.
Amazing.
It's amazing.
It makes you think that he might have been the dominant buck.
Absolutely.
It makes you think about a whole lot of scenarios in that situation.
You might change up some of your hunting tactics just knowing that.
Right. Absolutely.
In a couple scenarios, Yeah,
I agreed to that. It could potentially be a buck, that the doe is in love with or whatever.
Right.
And she followed his every move.
Right. Where is she going right now?
Right.
As opposed to where are they going to and what's following? It might be where is she going to go to? Just this little details, just little things sometimes make all the difference.
It's almost like a tip in itself right there.
It really is. Speaking of tips, Dusty, do we have a Chubby Tines tip of the week?
We do, Jay. I'm going to get into a little bit about shed hunting. Shed hunting's not easy. Shed hunting, you're not successful 100% of the time. But it's the experiences and the memories and the good times you had while you shed hunting that matter. So if you're going out shed hunting and you don't find anything, go again and again and again and again. One of them times you're going to go out there and there's going to be an antler laying there, and it's going to make the whole experience come together. That's my tip of the week. Don't give up on shed hunting. They're out there. You just got to locate them.
Gotcha. Love it. Awesome, man. Well, it's been another fantastic show, and I'd like to kind of run down a little bit about where we can find you and where everybody else can find me. But before we do, I'd like to just ask once again, if you have a couple extra bucks kicking around that you're not using, and you do listen to the show and you love the show and you love the Big Buck Registry and Chubby Tines Outdoors and you love all the pictures that show up, we're wondering if you might be able to help us out and send in a buck or $2 or $5 or whatever you have, $50. Anything helps, and all of it goes a long way. We don't
Absolutely.
We're not asking for a ton of money. We're just trying to offset some of our costs that it takes to run this show. So if you have something kicking around and you'd like to send it our way, we have a website set up specifically for donations to the Big Buck Registry, and you can visit it by going to bigbuckregistry.com/donate. And there you'll see a big green button with some information about what you're doing. And all you have to do is push the big green button. It'll send you to our PayPal link. And when you get there, you can just type in however much money you want to donate to the radio show. We're not doing this for profit. We're just trying to offset our costs. So that would be awesome if you could do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a couple bucks. Anything helps. You got the little extra. We really appreciate it.
Yep. If you picked up all the coins at the checkout counter at the package store, all the pennies, yeah, if it equals $1, we'll take that too. So.
Absolutely. Well, we really thank you for considering.
Yes. And thank you again to James Keller for his donation over the past week. It's really, really going to help us out a lot. Well, Dusty, how can we find you online and offline if we wanted to email you or something?
You can email me at Dusty@Big Buck Registry. And you also find me at Facebook.com/Chubby Tines Outdoors. Jay, how can the people reach out to you at the Big Buck Registry?
Well, I'd first like to invite you, if you're tuning in through a different podcast channel, to come and check us out on iTunes if you have an iDevice, an Apple device. And all you have to do is get the podcast app, and there are other ones out there like Overcast. Just type in Big Buck Registry when you get there, and you'll find us, and you can subscribe for free and be notified of all our new shows that came out. And if you wouldn't mind, please help us out and give us a review. If you haven't done that yet, we could really use the reviews. It helps us rank. It helps us show that we're doing well, and iTunes likes that if you say we like your show. And you can always find us on Facebook, facebook.com/Big Buck Registry. Twitter, we're getting into Twitter now. We've been on Twitter for a long time, but we're kind of doing more of that. That's at bigbuckregistry.com/Twitter. We're also on Instagram, bigbuckregistry.com/Instagram. You can always go to our website, which is just plain old bigbuckregistry.com. You'll see all of our shows listed there. And if you'd like to send in a picture, you can go to bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck, and you'll see all the information there on how to send in a picture, and you'll be featured on the Big Buck Registry if it's a good deer. And if you'd like to do a share for share, if you're in the outdoor industry, you can go to bigbuckregistry.com/S4S, or you can just do the old school method. You could either call me, 724-613-2825, leave me a message if we don't pick up, and you could always email me, jay@bigbuckregistry.com. I think that's all the places we're hanging out, man.
Big Buck everywhere. Big Buck. I love it. Hey, we got I'm not going to let our cat out of the bag here.
Yeah.
We got a project that we're working on, and, I think April's going to be an awesome month to be tuning in, and we'll be launching our new project.
Yes. We can't let you know what it is yet, But stay tuned. There's something big on the horizon.
There is something big.
Huge, bigger than anything you ever thought about.
You know, I want to shout out to the guys up there at the Up North Journal. Mike and Red, hope all's well. And, we look forward to our next adventure with you.
Absolutely. I'm going to give it a couple shout outs to Up North Journal, Carrie Z over at Carrie Zilka. I'm going to give a shout out to the Fish Nerds, my good buddies Dave and Clay over at the Fish Nerds, Brandon Hammonds over at Take Aim Outdoors, and Ken Blanchard from Blanchard Outdoors.
Awesome.
Shout out to all those guys. All great podcasts, all things you should be tuning into. If you're listening to this show, you want to listen to all those shows too.
Absolutely.
Well, man, I think that's a wrap.
That was a great show. And thanks again, Chris. Thanks again, James Keller, for your donation. We really appreciate that. And,
yes.
You guys take time. And if you got a few extra bucks, Big Buck Registry /donate.
Yes.
Donate a couple bucks and help us out with the cost of the show. We're rocking and rolling, and we got some awesome things coming in the future for everybody, and we sure do appreciate you tuning in with us every week right here on the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm Dusty Phillips.
And I'm Jay Scott.
We'll see you next week.
Can't wait.